Arizona is a phenomenal place for geologic landforms, and they are quite beautiful. This state is more than a dry, arid desert wasteland. What you can see and learn about geology in Arizona is remarkable. Some wonderful sights to see include the Painted Desert, with its unique shades of violets and light purples, caused from pressure over long periods of time, is quite amazing. Continuing on would be the fascinating structure of Meteor Crater, where a meteor entered Earth's atmosphere and struck here in Arizona. Another marvelous sight to see would be Verde Valley. This place has a rather large amount of vegetation, proving there is more than desert out here in this part of the West. And the grandest sight of them all would definitely have to be the Grand Canyon. Next, we'll discuss the geologic and tectonic setting of Arizona and look at some hypotheses of how the canyon was formed. Some possibilities are simply just erosion over a long period of time. Types of erosion include water, ice, wind, and sand. When water is present and temperature gets below freezing, water will expand in its frozen state, causing cracking and crumbling of the rocks. Wind and sand could blow against the rock, causing erosion by breaking down the rock slowly. Another possibility is from the Colorado River, carrying sand and other sediments right through this area, cutting away the rock to give us what we see today. A third hypothesis is that some scientists came up with is that there used to be a massive mountain range present here that was eroded down through many, many years. They believe this because the youngest, most present layer, being the Kaibab layer, is 250 million years old. They believe the missing layers were once tops of the mountains that were eroded and carried away off to the oceans. How could there be mountains in this region, you might ask? Well, Arizona is fairly close to the west coast, where the North American plate is moving west and colliding with the Pacific plate, which is subducting below the continental plate. A subduction zone can have major effects on land, causing forms such as volcanoes, earthquakes, and mountain building, which we will discuss here shortly on how to be prepared and prevent these natural hazards.
Arizona being characterized by its barren desert terrain with a crisscross of major rivers such as the Colorado and a tangle of interwoven streams and creeks. Arizona finds many of its larger and more frequent geological hazards from its lack of vegetation and the fact that the majority of the year the landscape is very arid with little precipitation. One such hazard felt in Arizona comes from the tectonic activity between the oceanic Pacific plate and the continental Northern American plate. Earthquakes go out further distances in this region on account of the denser bedrocks that allow these shock waves to carry for further differences, and Arizona has been on the receiving end of these shock waves for years. While there have been no recorded injuries in Arizona from these earthquakes, they have always been on smaller scales in terms only ranging in magnitudes from about 6 and lower. However, they still cause damages to property. These earthquakes, while small, can still be the cause of the two heavy hitters in Arizona, being landslides and debris flows. While earthquakes, forest fires, and even human activity can cause these hazardous occurrences, the overall largest culprit comes from Arizona's annual monsoon season. Since throughout the year Arizona is an arid landscape, once this monsoon period hits, the water isn't as easily absorbed into the ground and causes large amounts of runoff, which can cause landslides, debris flows, and in many cases can cause devastating flash flood. Arizona is also characterized by a vast networking of karst formations throughout its landscape, which can create sinkholes and open fractures. These collapses and karst formations can be routed to the dissolution of subsurface salts deposits that have been supporting the structure of these formations. One of the possible risks for much further down the line in Arizona is that there are actually 7 young volcanic fields, which, if one were to erupt, it would result in small cinder cones and related lava forms. Again, the hazard from volcanic activity in Arizona is a very small one, to say the least, and will not be seen for many, many years to come. One of the largest hazards in Arizona, while not a risk to human life, it is a risk to human establishment in Arizona. It is their expanding and contracting soils, which are caused by the large dry periods accompanied with the sudden monsoon periods. 50% of homes in Arizona are built on these bad soils, which can cause cracked foundations, damaged walls, or broken pipes, or even more property damage. The future hazards for Arizona is that they are at risk of catching the aftermath of any large earthquakes seen on the Pacific and North American plate boundaries, which could cause any of these hazards to be increased in frequency and size. Other than that, there is no unknown geological threat in Arizona that cannot be tracked or prevented properly. Since the geological hazards in Arizona are very identifiable, they are also very preventable. The larger hazards, being the landslides, flooding, and debris flow, can be counteracted with the construction of things like flood walls, trenches, which will cut the movement of material into populated areas and causing damages. Another way to help prevent this, because of the difficult arid environment, is by planting and growing more vegetation which will absorb the water during the monsoon seasons and keep the soil in place. While again, there haven't been any recorded deaths in Arizona on account of an earthquake, that doesn't mean that building standards shouldn't be brought up to code to help counteract the shaking and allow buildings to be more flexible when they're shaking from an earthquake to avoid any sort of property damages. To avoid any problems with sinkholes and other karst space issues, geological surveys need to be highly encouraged to see where the chances of a sinkhole opening or a cave collapsing and bringing down structures, or in the worst case, people down with it into the rubble. One of the hardest issues to treat is the rapidly contracting and expanding clay-rich soils in Arizona. But there are methods such as contractors pre-wetting the soil prior to foundation placement, which avoids cracking of the foundation. A few more remedies to the problem include the replacing of the first few feet of material with non-expansive materials, installing of a structural slab which is extra thickness and reinforcement to minimize movement. Also, the installing of subgrade irrigation or drainage control systems to keep soils within an acceptable range of moisture content, or even calcium treatments which alter the clay's mineralogy and reduce expansion potential. Arizona is a beautiful landscape that is characterized by many different geological features, but also a wide array of geological hazards, ranging from floods to landslides, from earthquakes to soil contractions and expansions. Arizona is a geological mosaic that will continue to serve as a hub of geological research and developments for years to come.